Hello, Ranger Bonnie. Nice to be talking to you today. How are you doing?
We're doing great. We're excited to talk with you too.
That's awesome to hear. It's really exciting to be talking to all of our ranger friends and new friends in the Park Visitor Center in Ventura Harbor because today I'm coming to you live from the bottom of the ocean, 12 miles away on Anacapa Island in Channel Islands National Park and Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. But even though I'm miles away from you and beneath the ocean, I can still hear you and you can see and hear me. So we're connected together despite the distance. I wonder just how far this connection can move. Ranger Bonnie, could we check with the audience and see where they're visiting from today?
Let's check. Where are some people visiting from?
I'm from Santa Barbara.
One more person?
From North Carolina.
Oh, fantastic. I heard Santa Barbara in North Carolina. Santa Barbara is very cool. That's a city where I live when I'm not out here underwater. North Carolina is a trek to get here across the United States, and yet we are still connected by this program. And even though when you return to North Carolina, you'll be thousands of miles away from Channel Islands National Park and Sanctuary, you're still going to be connected to the marine ecosystems in our park. Because right now, I'm not just underwater, I'm inside of a forest underwater. A forest made out of algae. Large brown algae like giant kelp, which you see me holding on to here in the surgy waters of Landing Cove, create canopies under the water and forests that support over 1,000 different species of marine life. There are kelps like giant kelps that form a canopy, other kelps like the southern sea palm that you see here to my left that compose the understory. So it's a lot like a forest that you might find on land. But we're still connected to these forests, even though sometimes they can be a little hard to get to. You have to go scuba diving in order to find kelp underwater. Kelp forests and other photosynthetic algae that take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen produce half of the oxygen in our Earth's atmosphere and in our oceans. Every breath that we take, we are connected to the kelp forests of Channel Islands National Park, whether we're from Santa Barbara or visiting from North Carolina. And I wonder, Bonnie, can we test that connection today? Can we take a deep breath together on the count of 3 and say, thanks for the help, kelp?
We're ready on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Fantastic. It's awesome to be connected to you today. And for all of us to thank the kelp for their role in our daily life. Now, you might have noticed I'm looking a little crabby today. But here in the kelp forest, there's many species that don't just need the oxygen it provides, but use the kelp as a home or as food. And we're going to take a look at a couple of those animals today and understand how we are connected to those animals and how they connect to the kelp. So just down to my left, volunteer diver Kaji is going to pan one of my favorite animals that we find in the kelp forest. Because just below my left flipper here, we've got a species that is indelibly connected to the oceans in California and to our cultural history. Because right here, underneath this rock, is what's called a cryptic species, or a type of animal that can be really hard to see. I'm going to draw an outline of it here for you with my hand. But we've got a green abalone, or a species of marine snail found in the park. Abalone are really cool animals. They have little eye stalks that sometimes will come out and take a look at their surroundings. They've got giant feet that they use to affix themselves to the rocks. And they're connected to the kelp because the kelp is their food and their home. Abalone live in kelp forests because they like to munch on little pieces of algae that drift away and get detached. One of which I just fed to the abalone there. It's already sensing the kelp and starting to nibble on it. Abalone, in some ways, are eating their own homes by munching on that drift kelp as it detaches from the kelp forest above. Abalone belong in the kelp forest. This is their home. And they're also connected to us as people. Right now, where we're diving in Channel Islands National Park wasn't always underwater. When sea levels were thousands years ago, were hundreds of feet lower, this was above the ground. Where we are currently diving is the traditional homeland and territory of the Chumash people. The Chumash have been connected to these islands and to the abalone for thousands of years, since time immemorial. Chumash would eat abalone, they would use the shells, and Chumash remain connected to abalone to this day. Across California, abalone has been an important cultural resource for many people. And abalone diving, or foraging for abalone, has been an important cultural touchstone, especially in Northern California in recent years. Here in Anacapa Landing Cove, we're in a marine reserve where abalone and other species are protected from fishing so that they can grow big and strong and produce offspring and more abalone. Ranger Bonnie, I wonder, do we have any questions from our audience about the abalone?
We're looking for a question. We have a question right over here.
So they're not in shells?
That's a good question. Yeah, abalone are in shells. So where I was tracing the outline of the abalone was its shell. And I stuck a little bit of kelp right at the edge of its shell. They've got big bowl-like shells. I'll show you another one in just a moment here that they use as protection with little holes that they can use to take water in and out as well. Abalone aren't the only species that are connected to the kelp forest. There's also even tinier, more colorful animals that we're going to bring out for you today. I'm signaling to our volunteer diver, Matt, for a very specific animal we were able to find today, just before we started this dive. In the meantime, Ranger Bonnie, do we have any other questions from our audience?
Audience members, do we have any other questions? Anything you're curious to ask? We do have a question from Ranger Bethany.
How long does it take for the abalone to get that big?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So abalone are incredibly long-lived species. The abalone that we just saw on video was probably decades old. It might have been just a tiny little baby when this area was established as a marine reserve. The oldest abalone recorded have been over 100 years old. They can grow to 11 inches across. Massive underwater snails, which is why having long-term protection of marine reserves is so important. So the abalone have somewhere to grow up, become reproductive size and send out more abalone into the ocean. Another animal found here alongside the abalone shell that I'm holding up here are sea slugs, specifically nudibranchs. The ones I'm holding today are a flamboyant kind of nudibranch called a Spanish shawl. Spanish shawls are tiny ocean sea slugs with brilliant coloration. A lot like slugs on land, they'll crawl around on the ocean floor. These are predatory slugs. They chase after anemones and hydroids. They're connected to the kelp forest because they like to eat different kinds of food that live in the kelp. You can see what looks like a bright orange mohawk on these sea slugs. Those are called cerata, or part of the sea slug that helps it take in water or oxygen from the water, as well as store toxic compounds from the food that they eat. They like to eat anemones and things that sting. It's also a way for the slug to say, hey, I don't taste good either, don't eat meat. And predators, when they see them, are able to differentiate and determine that they would be toxic to eat. I've actually got a double slug here for you, another Spanish shawl. You can just see its rhinophores, or its antenna-like appendages at the top of its head, which are sensing the environment around it. So sea slugs are connected to the kelp forest because they're predators feeding on the anemones and the hydroids that call this area home. And they're not the only predator that lives in the kelp forest either. We've got a very special guest animal that's about to be popping on the feed. Ranger Bonnie, do we have any questions about our sea slug friends in the meantime?
So their bright coloring, doesn't that make them a target for other predators that would feed on them?
Yeah, it's definitely a trade-off between being able to tell the predators, hey, don't eat me, and being able to attract those predators too. Luckily for these slugs, it takes very specialized predators to eat Spanish shawls, one of which is the navinax, another kind of nudibranch that will hunt down and eat cannibal style other sea slugs. So it's worth it to them, even though their predators see them coming, to show many other species that they're toxic and they shouldn't be eaten. Kind of like an underwater example of a poison dart frog. And I'm going to swap out with volunteer Matt. He's going to find a safe place for these nudibranchs. For a very special guest animal here on the Live Dive broadcast. This is the first time in many years that we've had this animal appear on the broadcast. It's a sea star, specifically a giant spine star, Hyzaster gigantus. Sea stars are echinoderm. They're in a family of animals that in Latin translates to spiky skin. And you can see why on the giant spine star. They have all of these little spines along their back for protection. Giant spine stars call the kelp forest home too. They're connected to the kelp and to us. They're predators. On their underside, you can see the thousands of little tube feet that they have that allow them to crawl along the ocean floor and stick to rocks right in the center of that central disc. The sea star's mouth. Sea stars have a really cool way of feeding. This giant spine star can spit its stomach out of its mouth and digest food on the outside so that it can sneak into mussel shells and other organisms, digesting them outside of its body. That would be wild if you just decided to spit your stomach out and start eating your food at the dinner table. You'd probably get criticized for bad manners, but the sea star doesn't care. Giant spine stars were more common in Channel Islands National Park a decade ago. But recently, over the last 10 years, there was a steep decline in their population. That also shows how we're connected to the kelp forest. In 2013, sea star wasting disease, one of the largest marine disease outbreaks on record, went through sea star populations along the Pacific coast. Over 20 different species were affected, most heavily the sunflower star. But giant spine stars were also greatly impacted by that disease spread. Their population numbers have declined significantly and are only now just beginning to rebound. Sea star wasting syndrome was caused by a bacteria, and it was likely made worse and able to spread better because of warming ocean temperatures. For 3 years after the disease outbreak, the ocean got really hot compared to its normal average. It was called the blob, was a term for this part of the ocean getting really toasty. And scientific studies have modeled that the blob was up to 50 times more likely to have occurred due to climate change. We're connected to the kelp when we burn fossil fuels, contributing to anthropogenic climate change. We have an impact on the kelp and can cause more extreme weather events to occur more frequently. Luckily, the giant spine star is beginning to come back, and scientists have recently discovered the bacteria behind sea star wasting syndrome, which will help restoration efforts in the future. We're connected to the kelp, and we're able to impact how species like the giant spine star can respond as well. We can use this connection to create a healthier ecosystem for us all. This is one of my favorite animals to find in the kelp forest. I know I say that about all the animals, but it's true. Ranger Bonnie, do we have any questions from our audience about the giant spine star?
We have one question, and the question is?
About how old is that star?
That's a good question. So a lot of species of sea star will get to adult status, meaning sexual maturity, after a couple of years. This particular star, it's not the largest giant spine star I've seen, but it's well into its adult stage. So I would guess this star is probably at least a minimum 5-6 years old, probably more. Species of sea star are known to live for a really long time. The sunflower star, an even bigger species, is probably thought to live over 50, maybe even 70 years old. Although it's really hard to tell just how long a sea star species can grow. I'll pass this species back to volunteer Matt, because right now we've got one more kelp forest connection that we can make. Underneath this big boulder behind me, just a few minutes ago, we saw one of the most charismatic species found in Channel Islands National Park. So our camera operator, Kaji, is going to head that way and take a look. In the meantime, do we have any other questions from our audience, Bonnie?
And the question is?
Do they lay their own eggs or do they reproduce with other stars?
Oh, that's a good question. So giant spine stars are broadcast spawners. That means they synchronize and release their gametes out into the ocean. Their eggs actually fertilize outside of their bodies, in the water column. They're not exactly very involved parents. Oh, look, we found another abalone as well. So here, we're taking a look inside the home of the California spiny lobster. California spiny lobster are really important species here in the kelp forest. They don't have claws like a lot of the Maine lobsters you might be used to seeing. But California spiny lobsters are still predators. They like to eat a lot of the animals that graze in the kelp forest, like purple urchins, the really spiky small sea urchins that we'll find here in Channel Islands National Park. By eating the urchins, lobsters are connected to the kelp too. They keep the urchins from overgrazing the kelp or munching too much of it, because Once the kelp forest is gone, the urchins sometimes will form a barren with thousands of urchins covering the bare rocks below. Almost like the scar of a wildfire on land, where you've got nothing but barren ground. Spiny lobsters help keep the ecosystem in balance. They're connected to us because humans like to eat them, but also because of their impact on the kelp forest. Here in this marine reserve, we have healthier and more abundant kelp, in part because these lobsters are protected. They're able to grow big and hunt and eat larger urchins, keeping the kelp forest in balance. Over 40 years of monitoring data shows that marine reserves, especially on this island and the island next to us, have greater abundance of kelp, more kelp forest, as well as larger and more abundant predators, like the lobster. Another way that we are connected to the kelp forest. Ranger Bunny, does our audience have any thoughts or questions about these slightly timid California spiny lobster that we see?
Any questions about the lobsters? We have another question.
How deep are you right now?
That's a good question. We're 22 feet deep at the moment, which is normally in this cove can get a little chilly earlier in the year. Right now it's nice and toasty in the mid 60 degrees. So we're not that cold and we're not that deep. Getting to hang out with these lobsters, it's a good dive day for sure. So we've talked about during this program many ways that we are connected to the kelp forest. How the kelp is connected to us by producing the air that we breathe, by helping to increase biodiversity, supporting many species of life, by taking in carbon dioxide, helping to mitigate the impacts of climate change. And how we are connected to the kelp, how by creating marine reserves, we're able to protect the kelp and the predators that create ecosystem balance. And how broader global human impacts like climate change can be felt locally here in our park. I wonder, Ranger Bonnie, if our audience has any thoughts or ideas about other ways we might be connected to the kelp and how we can help the kelp and do our best to be good stewards of our ocean.
Any ideas on how we can help protect the kelp? We have one idea.
Use less stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely can reduce the amount of stuff that we use. Here in Landing Cove, we often find marine debris or trash that's made its way into the ocean, created by humans. The oceans are often a giant garbage disposal for trash that isn't put into landfills or disposed properly. And so we find all kinds of crazy things in the cove. We found one earlier today, and volunteer Matt has a very interesting example that we're about to bring over here. You might have guessed, based on my underwater sign, what Matt is going to bring to us today. We're down here at the bottom of Landing Cove. Even though we're surrounded by water, and we found a beverage container, probably an old Coke bottle, that's been in Landing Cove for a while. You can see all kinds of algae, bryozoans, other animals that have started to grow and encase the bottle. Tastes like seawater to me. But here in Landing Cove, trash from the mainland can make its way out and impact our environment. Sometimes plastics can be mistaken by animals such as sea turtles for their favorite food of the jellyfish and be nibbled on. Or larger marine debris can release chemicals into the ocean around us. So it's important that we all do our part to help the kelp by reducing the amount of trash that we make, by reusing things to keep them from being trash, and by disposing of our waste properly. So we can have one fewer bottle in Landing Cove the next time we go diving. Thank you all very much for joining us today during this program from underwater. I feel more connected to you all already, and I'm excited for you to keep making those connections and understanding how we can impact the world around us when we go back home today, whether it be Santa Barbara or North Carolina. Ranger Bonnie, do we have any questions from our audience or thoughts?
We do. We have a question, and the question is?
I just want to say thank you to all the rangers and the National Park Service for the incredible work you do. And I hope your funding will continue. We will always support you. Thank you so much.
We appreciate the message of support. A lot of our work is making sure that our national parks can provide for the enjoyment of the American public, that people coming to visit have the opportunity to experience our parks, get outside, or learn about our parks from afar. So we encourage everyone to go out and find your park near where you live, whether it's underwater or above the ocean. Do we have any other questions, Ranger Bonnie, from our audience?
At the moment, we have no other questions. On the count of three, we want to give you a big thank you, Ruvain. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you all for joining us today. Best wishes to everyone in our audience.
Thank you, Ruvain.